As Democrats look to figure out their future in the second Trump administration, they're still grappling with their past and why they came up short last November. In his new book, Uncharted, How Trump Beat Biden, Harris, and the Odds in the Wildest Campaign in History, author Chris Whipple goes behind the scenes with key players to tell the internal story of the campaigns. I recently spoke to him and started by asking him about that historic moment of the 2024 race, the decision for President Biden to end his run.
You know, it was the wildest campaign in history, as you know, Kristen. We all lived through it, but it was even wilder and stranger behind closed doors. And as the walls closed in on Joe Biden, it was just extraordinary. I mean, I write all about it in my book. And when it came down to that fateful weekend of July 2021, Steve Ricchetti, one of his closest aides, and Mike Donilon came to see the president. They told him that the polls were tough, but that there was a path still that he could still, possibly win this thing if he wanted to be the nominee, but it would be brutal. The party leaders were against him. But they were ready to die on that hill with Joe Biden. And the extraordinary story, the mystery at the heart of the book is how his inner circle could have been lost, could have been in this fog of delusion and denial. They thought, some of them, that Joe Biden could run, he could win, and he could beat Trump.
It is just extraordinary, particularly after that devastating debate performance that we all witnessed, the moment of realization that not only was President Biden facing an uphill battle, but what many Democrats believed was going to be an impossible task of trying to beat President Trump. You have new details about that, the fact that Ron Klain, his former chief of staff, came back for debate prep, Chris, and was astonished by what he discovered. What can you tell us there?
Yeah, you can't really read it anywhere else. Ron Klain told me, walked me through it day by day, hour by hour, that week at Camp David prior to that ill-fated debate. Ron Klain was shocked by Joe Biden's condition. He was exhausted. He was out of it. He didn't understand the back and forth between the campaigns. He wasn't able to talk about his plans for a second term. At one point, he wanders out of Aspen Lodge, the presidential cabin, goes and collapses into a lounge chair and falls sound asleep. He was obsessed, when he was alert, he was obsessed with foreign leaders. Klain said half jokingly, I thought maybe he thought he was president of NATO instead of the U.S. So it was really extraordinary that they went ahead with this debate, sent him out on that stage to go toe-to-toe with, a street brawler like Donald Trump when he was in that condition. But again, they believed what they wanted to believe instead of their lying eyes, in effect.
Well, to that point, one of the sources you talked to was Bill Daley. And just to remind our viewers, that's President Obama's former chief of staff. And he told you, Chris, that when he saw signs the president had deteriorated, it was very clear to him. But the campaign, and this speaks to the point that you're making, just didn't, and quite frankly, wouldn't see it the same way. Take us a little bit deeper. Why do you think that was?
They wouldn't accept it. And, even during the debate, they were watching, some of them were watching so-called, dial groups, focus groups who were controlling dials, turning them up or down. And they convinced themselves that because they were turning the dials down during the latter stage of the debate, when Trump was speaking, that somehow Biden had won the debate. I mean, they were,
wow.
Part of this is hubris. Part of this is a kind of article of faith that back in 2020, after Joe Biden finished 4th in Iowa and 5th in New Hampshire and pulled it out, that, everybody else was wrong and they were right. So some of this was hubris, and some of it was the fact that, in fairness, there were, Biden was able to govern behind closed doors. He was able to, he still was articulate and masterful on Middle Eastern policy. He negotiated that prisoner swap literally on the morning that he abdicated. What he couldn't do was campaign. And, I have this remarkable story about how a veteran campaign operative interviewed for a job in the 2024 campaign and was in the Oval with Biden and his aides, and the conversation took a candid turn when they said, look, in 2020, we had COVID as an excuse. We could hide him in the basement. What do we do now?
Wow. What a remarkable anecdote. And just finally, you talk and report on the Trump campaign and their perspective of that moment when President Biden steps down, when then Vice President Kamala Harris takes the torch and becomes the nominee. What was going on inside the Trump campaign?
Well, first of all, Donald Trump was furious that he said he now had to face Kamala Harris. He thought he had Biden exactly where he wanted him. He complained to Paul Manafort, who believe it or not, was working on his campaign. He said, you know, what, now I have to win it 3 times? In his view, he'd beaten Biden, he'd beaten the courts, and now he had to beat Kamala Harris. Susie Wiles is a fascinating character, and I've gotten to know her. I've talked to her a number of times. You know, she said they never doubted for a minute that they would win this one, that they would win the race. And she said in kind of a brutally candid moment, she said, we couldn't believe how bad she was, referring to Kamala Harris. She was referring to the period right after the convention. I mean, I thought she did well through the convention, but then she sort of went radio silent for a little while. They thought that that was because they were trying to hide her. The campaign was hiding her the same way they hid Joe Biden in 2020 in the basement.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.